Well, hello, everyone. My name is Corey Green. I am a board member for the Penny Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, The Power of the Collective, Our Control. We're very excited to discuss the impact that the Black-owned community foundations have had in our community through philanthropy giving and the space that they occupy there, but also the impact that have been made during COVID and the social unrest that we've been experiencing. We're very excited to have Dr. Jackie Copeland, who is the founder of Black Philanthropy Month and the WISE Fund. She will share some thoughts with us, but also she'll moderate a very strong panel that we have here today for the leaders of the only Black-owned community foundations in the world. So that panel does include Lord Watson, CEO and founder of the Penny Foundation. It also includes POISE founder and President Mark Lewis, and also the Prosperity Foundation's founder and board chair Howard Hill, along with executive director Orcella Hughes. So we encourage you all to tag your family and friends, let them know that this event is happening. We hope to have a great impact on our community, a great dialogue. Please put any questions or comments that you may have in the chat box. We'll certainly respond to those. But we're just thankful that you're here to join us. Really appreciate the time that we're going to spend today diving into this very important topic. So now I'll just turn it over to Dr. Copeland to share her thoughts on this space and start with the panel.
Hi, everyone. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Corey, for presiding over this event. And excuse the frog in my throat. I live in California, so once in a while, smoke affects all of us, especially this time of year. I'm just delighted to be here during this historic 10th anniversary of Black Philanthropy Month and to have a conversation today with the U.S.'s only Black-owned community foundations. I wanted to start today with a couple of comments about Black Philanthropy Month in particular and where we are as a movement. I love African proverbs. I think they contain wisdom of millennia for Black people around the world. And an Igbo proverb from Nigeria says, "Wealth is not what you own, is what you give away," which I think is a pretty profound statement about how Black communities everywhere approach giving. Black giving is ancient. It was created by our African ancestors and transferred and adapted by our forebears in the Americas. People often say, well, what's African about African American culture? Well, I can tell you one thing that is definitely African is our giving. Our giving philosophies and culture at core are similar across African descent people across the world. It's part of our heritage. And no matter where you were born or how you define your identity, we have all kinds of words. Some people say they're Black, African American. I even heard a new one the other day, Afro Cosmopolitan, which was, I had to look that one up. But giving is hardwired in every Black community worldwide. And that's important to keep repeating because we will still hear people say that Black people don't give. And that's simply untrue. It's our birthright. We consider it our responsibility. Now, I created Black Philanthropy Month in the first place to remind successive generations and leaders throughout the field, long after my time here is done, that our giving is our heritage and it's our power, that Black giving matters, and it's a driver of not only America's, but the world's history, our future, and our progress. That our giving gene is so strong that for 30 years, the data has proven over and over again that we give a higher percentage of our income in philanthropy than any other ethnic group in the US, estimated to be $12 million, $12 billion rather, for African Americans, and another 12 billion for Black immigrants. And so that is an actual $24 billion economy of giving. But even saying that, our giving is about so much more than money. It's about our capacity to love each other in a nation, in a world that doesn't always love people back, Black people back. It's about giving time, talent, treasure, ties, voice, but also self-care and hope and equity in good times and bad. And even with our resilient traditions, Black philanthropy always adapts to the time. I hope you'll join the WISE Fund and Black Philanthropy Month for the last summit of our 10th anniversary on August 31st. We'll be with Sunny Hostin of The View, Reverend Naomi Tutu, as well as other leaders celebrating Black women's leadership in philanthropy worldwide. And I want to make sure you see the registration link in the chat, or I think maybe our hosts can also share it in Penny Foundation's Facebook page. A way that we can all celebrate Black philanthropy at this critical time is that many of us, thousands, have worked together to come up with a set of Black equity principles and a pledge to promote fair and high impact Black giving in these times when many companies are making promises about what they will give to us to be, or how they will invest in us, to be more equitable in their funding. But let's just say in some cases that support has not materialized. So you will also see the link to our funding principles, and I encourage you, no matter what kind of community giving or other philanthropy organization or group you're part of, to sign the pledge. If we work together, we can make all funders accountable and finally make equity real. I often feel that funding equity and economic justice are the last frontier of the civil rights movement. And so please sign the pledge so we can finally make funding and economic justice real. Our giving traditions are really represented well today. I think one of the most exciting developments in contemporary Black American giving is the development of Black founded and owned community foundations. So it's really special for me to be here today to facilitate this conversation with three leaders in the Black Community Foundation movement. And so I'd like to welcome each of these leaders to the conversation today. Thank them for all the work they do. And I'm going to start with Mark Lewis, who is president and CEO of Pittsburgh's POISE Foundation, our first Black community foundation. I believe POISE is now celebrating its 40th year anniversary. Um, a really strong legacy in that great city, created by civic and business leader Bernard Jones. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
I'm also happy to introduce Pastor Ursula Hughes, who is the executive director of the Connecticut-based Prosperity Foundation. She has a notable career of community leadership. I often think of our philanthropy as my ministry, and I know that Pastor Hughes feels the same way. So welcome, Pastor Hughes.
Thank you, Dr. Jackie.
All right, and we also have one of our Black Community Foundation founders today, and Howard Hill, who created the Prosperity Foundation to support um, Black self-empowerment and philanthropy and entrepreneurship in Connecticut. Thank you for your legacy, sir. And I would like to introduce Lord Watson Jr., who is the founder and CEO of the Penny Foundation, illustrious career as a social entrepreneur, a man of faith and activist making a difference for Birmingham, Alabama's Black communities. I founded about 10 years ago to improve life and opportunity for Black people in that great city. And so welcome to you all. We have some questions that we'd like to share to get the conversation going. But one place I would like to start is I'd like to know why you felt that your community foundation was needed, and tell us what you primarily focus on these days to address the issues in your community. I will start with Mark.
Thank you. I was going to say ladies first, but
No, not you can't get away with that.
First of all, Dr. Copeland, it's great to see you. It's probably been a couple of years, so great to see you. And congratulations on 10 years of Black Philanthropy Month. That's a huge accomplishment, and I know POISE Foundation has supported it over the years, and definitely glad to do that.
And we are happy for that. It definitely takes a village to build a movement. So thank you for your contributions.
That's right. So I'll try to be as brief as I can to answer that question. So POISE Foundation, we're actually the second public foundation created in the country. The 21st Century Foundation was the first, and they're no longer an independent foundation, which makes us, I believe, the oldest Black public community foundation in the country. And the reason why POISE was started, Bernard Jones, who was the founder of the foundation, worked for a lot of different organizations, but he was basically what I would call a social activist back in the 1950s and 60s. He had two real passions. One was to help youth. And so he created youth organizations, worked with youth. He empowered youth to clean up their community in the Hill District of Pittsburgh, which was decimated by urban renewal, if you want to call it that, back in the 40s and 50s. And then his other piece was this idea of owning control of our own financial power. And so he kind of married those two over the years. Like I said, he created a youth organization. With that organization, he learned that depending on organizations like the United Way and some major foundations for funding, often led the program to do things that the program did not think was in the best interest of its youth that it was serving, especially inner city youth. But that's where the money was coming from. And so from that, he learned about endowment funds and began to build an endowment fund for Urban Youth Action, which was the organization he created. And several years after that, having success with creating that endowment fund, he also created some other social investment clubs or groups. Again, this is back in the probably 60s, early 70s. And in 1980, he decided to bring those funds together to actually launch POISE Foundation. And so for the fact that a lot of the funding that was coming through, he did not feel was being directed to our community the way our community needed it to be directed the most or be used in the right way. As well as, again, that notion of having that financial control so that we control our own destiny, our own future, and we control our own programming. And so those three funds were brought together in 1980 with only $170,000 in no operating income. And so for the first 16 years of the foundation, it was basically a volunteer-run foundation. When he retired from his job in 1996, he took over as the first president, and then I succeeded him in that mission.
Okay. Well, thank you for setting that ground. And we have one of the founders, or the founder of the Prosperity Foundation. And I'm going to ask you as well, sort of beyond your general motivation, what were you hoping to achieve for your community, Howard, when you founded the foundation?
I'm going to answer for Howard. He is unable, due to a commitment at his business, unable to join us on time at this moment. But I was right there when it did start. I am Ursula Hughes, the executive director for the Prosperity Foundation. And Dr. Jackie, it is an honor to be in this panel with you, and of course with Mark and Lord. We too are a annual sponsor for the Black Philanthropy Month Summit for the past 4 years now. And so we take honor in being a part of that celebration every year.
Thank you so much.
You're absolutely welcome. To be honest, the Prosperity Foundation actually did start right there in a Black-owned business that Howard Hill owns, the Howard Cahill Funeral Services. And it was started because we thought that the community needed resources for funeral funding because we weren't prepared at the time of death. So that vehicle gave us the idea of, if there was a fund available, then we can help families not scrape at the last minute for funeral planning. But immediately after we started that work, we saw the need was deeper than funeral planning. Life planning was missing. Legacy planning was missing. And so we immediately shifted all of the planning from funeral planning to what will my legacy look like in the future? What is the Black progressive endowment plan for our community? And the 3 areas that we focused on were education, health, and economics. And we galvanized with many grassroots level working Black leaders in the New Haven area. That's when we were only focusing in one part of Connecticut. And from firefighters to local physicians to just community activists who understood the disparities that were happening in Black communities and saw the need to address those needs and to make a difference. And so in 2015, we became an independent 501c3 Black Community Foundation. And through fundraising and grant making, we're able to make that impact in other Black-led and Black servant organizations throughout the state now. So we're proud of that work, and we're proud to be a part of this panel.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that vision and support of your regional, statewide, and even the national Black philanthropy movement. So I'm going to move to Lord and ask you, as founder, kind of what were you hoping to achieve by creating the foundation?
Thank you for joining us and moderating this this panel. I now learned that I'm going to change my description from back to Afro cosmopolitan. I'm going to start using that more regularly now. But again, my name is Lord Watson with the Penny Foundation. To answer the question, we started in 2017. There's a vision that it took 6 years to get off the ground. And our whole focus is eliminate economic inequality in the Black community. And to do that through gathering and collecting and connecting resources, people, organizations, and entities in the areas of education, economic development, and community development. And so B is a platform, right? A platform for people, organizations who want to invest in the community and invest in the community with an organization that's culturally culturally aligned with the community, so that we don't just serve the community, we are the community in which we work in.
Okay. Well, it's just so impressive that 3 of you exist and are sort of keeping our legacy strong in your community and empowering us economically as well. That much is clear. So I cut my teeth in the philanthropy world as a community foundation program VP back in Philadelphia. So I know some of the special challenges that any community foundation faces. And so in terms of your communities, your constituents, what are some of the special challenges and difficulties you feel you're facing as a Black owned community foundation in terms of working with your constituents, your community?
You want to go, Arcella?
Oh, sure.
Go.
I can.
Go ahead.
Okay. One of the struggles, or what have I experienced with leading a Black foundation, is breaking down the stories and the myths and the narratives that have been taught to our community.
Mhm.
You alluded to it in the beginning about people that Black people don't give. And that's not the truth. That is a story that has been taught in our community and has been repeated almost in perpetuity. The other thing that Black people don't support one another, that Black people don't shop with one another. I am also a Black business owner. My Black business is successful because of other Black people. And I know other Black businesses that are also successful because of how the community supports them. So our biggest challenge is breaking down that story that has been taught to us, that story of not loving our community or not loving one another has been the hardest thing to just strip away from us, because it's been taught in the wrong history of all of our public school systems, and then manifested when we became adults. And then when you try to bring everyone together, now you're trying to change the mindsets of adults to really love and appreciate being Black. And it was one thing when James Brown said, "I'm Black and I'm proud," but there is just, it's a wonderful thing when you say it for yourself and you mean it, and then you tell someone else to say, be proud of being Black. So that is the biggest struggle, is trying to break down the narratives and the systemic stories of who we are out of our DNA.
Wow, that's a pretty profound statement. And I guess that's just an ongoing challenge that we have as Black leaders. And I often say part of Black philanthropy is self-love. It's recognizing and acting upon our humanity. So thanks for sharing that. Interested to hear what the other panelists feel their greatest challenge has been working with the community. And so I'll go to Lord, if you could share the foundation's experience.
Yeah, so I think one of the barriers that I have had to overcome and will continue to have to overcome is the fact that you just don't know a lot about organized philanthropy. It's not something that we've oftentimes been engaged in. Our philanthropy doesn't necessarily look the same and flow from different systems. And so here I am talking about, community foundation or community chest, donor advised funds and things like that we normally don't talk about. And so people look at me like I'm crazy, right? So they're like, well, what is this? And so it's the matter of, one, you're new. And so when you're new, they got to look at you. They got to see if you're gonna last. And so it's being new. Then it's introducing this new concept, and then it's just different in the city, right? Because right now I look like, well, as far as I know of, I'm the only Black male that works in organized philanthropy, right? In the city that's 74% Black. So I'm different. I'm a unicorn, and so it's how do you use a unicorn, and what does it look like, and what is this thing really going to do? And so that's the challenge that we face right now. Is we are a growing organization, continue to do work and connect more people in communities in creative ways.
Okay. Well, that's a really profound statement to say that in all of the city of Birmingham, you're the only Black male in the philanthropy field. That also says a lot about dominant philanthropy and its lack of inclusion as well, because I know Birmingham has many philanthropic organizations. Mark, I want to turn to you, and I actually want to want you to answer the question, but I want to segue to another related issue. And so, if you could share for us, given the relatively long view of the POISE Foundation, what your key difficulties have been in working with the Black community, but let's talk about partnerships as well. How you've approached partnerships with Black and other stakeholders in Pittsburgh.
Sure. So yeah, answering the first question, I definitely agree with both Lord and Orcella. I think those are two critical points. I want to add a third that's a little different, and that's just the result of structural and institutional racism. And what I mean by that is when you think about philanthropy, if you look at community foundations across the country, most of those funds that are created in community foundations are either business owners or people of some means or a little bit of wealth. It's rare, and most community foundations don't allow you to start funds with very small amounts of money. And so what this institutional racism has done in our country is really prohibited the Black community from exercising what this country says it's really about, and that's capitalism, that's building business, and that's building wealth. I think today we still only own about 2% of the wealth in this country, although we represent 12 or 13% of the population. If you look at Black business income, I think Black business income at this time is still under $200 billion a year in a country that has over 20 trillion of economic impact or economic power every year. And so when you think about that and how that trickles down to a local community, one of the challenges we have is just trying to find people of means, right? One, to know that we exist, as Lord mentioned, to overcome that mindset, or Orcella mentioned, right? But then to have enough people in the community that have means to create funds, to build those funds. And so that's a struggle. And so one of the things we often talk about, even though we're a foundation and we do grant making to nonprofits, is the necessity to build Black business. We cannot create wealth simply by creating more nonprofits, right? We have to invest in Black business. We have to create that type of wealth in Black business so that we have not just giving from our substance, but also giving from our excess. And I think that's where we lack the most, is because, again, this country has not allowed enough Black people to really build that excess, to be able to just freely give and support various causes, not only various nonprofits, but to strategically build assets in community foundations. As far as Black partnerships, one thing that we pride ourselves on, we're a small foundation, and Pittsburgh is filled with foundations. I think we're still probably in the number 6 largest philanthropic community per capita. And so we have very large foundations, family foundations. We do have a community foundation that's probably $1.5 billion itself. And so, we're this small foundation in the midst of all this philanthropic money that flows. But one thing we can say is that we are tied to our community. And so when even foundations come to us when they're looking at various initiatives, to get our perspective on, programs that need to be funded or initiatives that need to be started, because they see that we have a core connection to our community. And so one thing that was created just recently as a result of the COVID pandemic was a Black Equity Coalition. And so POISE is one of the leaders of the Black Equity Coalition. That coalition was started and with a fiscal sponsor of it. So that means we take control of the financial welfare that comes through. We do all the accounting, recording, any grants come through our foundation. So that's something that we serve and partner with our community. We currently, or at any given time, have about 20 fiscal sponsor partners that we receive funding through and allow those programs that were not 501c3s to actually execute their programs throughout our community. But the Black Equity Coalition, just very briefly, was really focused on the pandemic and the impact it had on our community, and making sure that the data that came out was accurate and was done from an equitable lens. Going forward, we're now looking at how do we expand that to equity across the board, and looking at the social determinants of health. And so that's going to result in engaging large health systems. We have meetings with our state health department, our local health department, but also all the other determinants: education, community, social and community context, neighborhood and built environment, economic stability. So we're going to try to create a network of organizations coming together really address that. And POISE Foundation is part of the glue to make that happen.
Okay, well, the convening is an important approach to partnership, and just being at the table to advocate and speak up for our communities. I'd like to sort of continue that line of conversation a little bit as we close out this segment of the conversation, and I believe that we want to engage with our participants in some Q&A. But Pastor Hughes, if you could just highlight one of the key partnerships that your foundation is involved in and how it's benefiting the community.
Always forget to unmute. Thank you for that question. We actually have had several key collaborations for our success. And certainly the Hartford Foundation, the Community Foundation of Hartford, Connecticut for Planned Giving was a key contributor to the success of being able to place grants in the Hartford community. That's 22 communities where we see a great melting pot of BIPOC communities that absolutely have been, disenfranchised from the table of where money is located for them to further advance their initiatives and their programs. We've also partnered with the Community Foundation of New Haven, who was actually we started there as a component, grew into an independent 501c3. And so they've also have contributed for grant making and for operating expenses. The William Casper Graustein Memorial Fund and the Nellie Mae Foundation. These are both educational foundations who have been able to use the Prosperity, but partner with the Prosperity Foundation to locate those programs that are dealing with educational matters. And for us, the education is not just academic, but it's education of self. As I said earlier, how the history of Black America is just not told right. We actively look out and seek organizations that are also talking about the education of self. Who am I as a Black person? Who am I as a Black child? And when I grow up into my community, how can I then make an impact? So those educational grants are so important because it's up to us to correct the stories and to write good ones as well. So those collaborations have been very key and important to us. And they also understand that we are intentional about funding other Black-led and Black-serving organizations. So they know where they are supporting, they know that that's our initiative.
I mean, just such an important leadership role. That education, being at the table, advocating for us, and also assembling philanthropic capital to, walk the talk of equity and justice. So thank you for that. Lord, the final word to you about partnerships before we open up for Q&A. How have you been approaching it? What's your hope for partnership, and what's made a difference so far?
Yeah, so I think when I think about partnerships and the successful example we've had, our programming really comes from partnerships. So it was during the June or July of last year, we had some businesses, Black businesses, to come to the foundation who were concerned about the number of businesses who were not being not able to access PPP for whatever reason. And so from that we begin to look at, okay, well, why is this happening? And can we do something about this? And so that's how we end up creating what we call our Future Forward Fund. And so what we want to do is create a method and a mechanism to where businesses could apply for relief and meet them where they're at. And so, it's a one-page application. We actually have a grant cycle going right now. It closes on Monday, but it's a one-page application. You can answer the questions. If you don't answer them written, you can film yourself, answer the questions, upload the video, however it is. But we made it simple. And so to be able to to then make micro grants in amounts of $500 to $1,000. And so what that did was it allowed us to partner with partners like Verizon's, it was Wells Fargo, and some local State Farm agent and some local other entities who allowed us to put this grant cycle together and to help businesses. And so that's an example for me about, we are a platform for people who want to invest strategically in the community. And so it also allows us to begin to gather data from those businesses about their needs and figure out pressure points and pain points. So now that we can create some other programming behind that to help support them and other businesses that are like them.
Well, just thank you for sharing that story, and everybody. I mean, it's just such a seminal moment in our history of philanthropy in the U.S. to have 3 community foundations, sort of with the mantle of economic empowerment, improvement of our community. I'm going to ask you to think about a question. We're going to do the Q&A, and then I'm going to come back to you. Every day, I am very concerned about the potential long-lasting impact of COVID on our communities, our physical, our mental health, our economic health. I even asked myself the question if we're going to be back to the 1940s or 50s when all the dust settles. So I want you to think of a call to action that you could make to the Black philanthropy movement and your stakeholders and constituents to help us recover and build better post-COVID. So just give that some thought, because I personally think it's a pretty deep question as to how we hold on to what we've got and scale and do better after this COVID nightmare is over. So I'm going to turn to the Q&A, and I'm not quite sure how we're going to do this. If people from the audience will be able to pose their questions live, or if we will see them in the chat. And so if our host would direct us, I am sure our panelists are happy to answer any questions.
So I think while we're waiting on a question, or waiting on the audience to pose questions, it'd be cool if we can go ahead and just continue the conversation around questions ourselves, and then if we see a question that pops up, we can go from there.
Oh, sure. If that's the way you all want to approach it, I'm certainly game for that, because I could actually talk to you all day long. So just another key question for me, given that you're community foundations, tell me about just what control looks like. Each of you have talked about economic justice and your role in promoting business opportunity, building wealth. In many ways, your existence is an example of what owning the means of production can do in our communities. So what does it look like? Just think ahead, I don't know, a decade from now. What do you think is a vision or possible to increase access to resources, access and control of financial resources in each of your communities?
Yeah, maybe I'll start out. So I think I'm sure our other two, my other two colleagues will have some additional response to this, but regardless of what community you live in, I think part of it is just the mindset, right? Mm-hmm. How do we change our mindset? And this is probably my challenge as well. How do we really change our mindset to think about the power that collective brings, right? So when we throw out numbers like 1.4 trillion, which is the estimated disposable income for Black people in this country, that number is only 1.4 trillion when you talk about the collective, right?
Right.
No individual has, really no individual in this world has that type of money. But as a collective, that could be substantial power. That could be substantial control. The problem is that on paper, it collects and, comes up to that's what Black people have. Reality is we as Black people don't use that 1.4 trillion in a collective manner to really impact our communities the way they could be.
Right.
So it's not that we don't have resources. It's not that we don't have the ability to give time, our talent, and other things. So often, I think over the last 30 years, what I've seen is that we've gone from more of that family and extended family and strong neighborhood concept to more of this individualistic view.
Yeah.
And whenever you get to that individualistic view, you begin to disseminate power. And so one of the things we have to think about, whether it's Pittsburgh, it's in Connecticut, it's in Birmingham, or anywhere else across this country, is how do we simply change our mindset, right? To think about investing back in us. So there's just real brief, something I've been trying to share with our community for the last few years now. What would it look like if you took 5% of your spend, right, your household spend, and focus that back in the Black community or in Black business? So in the Pittsburgh region, we have about $4 billion of Black household income. And if we took 5% of that, not changing what you buy, not changing, where, definitely changing where you have to spend your money, but, not changing much about how you spend your money or what you're trying to buy, but just where you buy it from, right? If we shifted 5% in Pittsburgh alone, that would be $200 million a year that could go to our Black businesses, that could create thousands of jobs, that would create additional spend, that would create the need for additional businesses. And just from that perspective alone, we could change the dynamics of our communities. We often talk about, the big thing right now is policing. Police don't create things, they react to things. And a lot of times they may not react the right way. But if we reduce crime, right, then you have less policing in our communities. And you reduce crime by reducing poverty. So we can do that by, again, changing our mindset to really think about investing back in us. And 5% is not changing the whole world. That's a very small part of your spend. So that's just one thing. And whether that's spending on businesses, whether that's giving to nonprofits, whether that's investing in foundations, but investing in businesses that we own and control, keeping that wealth in our communities is just one of those ways.
Well, it sounds like you just described a good initiative for POISE Foundation.
We're working on it.
All right, because that's a very clear goal. So thanks for sharing that. And so I'm going to go to Pastor Hughes. What's your thought about ways we can increase control of financial and economic resources in our community through the foundation?
We can't stop talking about us, and we cannot stop telling our stories. When I think about this conversation, which is actually part 2 to what we started last year, the buzz was really exciting and hyped because the country was in a heightened state of emergency. And everyone was Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and we were the news last year. And so we have to, in order to stay in control of the narrative and of the resources and the finances, we have to keep telling the story. We cannot wait for an emergency for Blackness to be a topic, and we cannot wait for a pandemic for Blackness to be a topic, because we have been in a pandemic since 1619. So this is not a new pandemic. This is not a new situation. It's just a different pandemic. So the control has to start with us loving ourselves. And I cannot say that enough. Love being Black and love giving Black and love your community enough to say, even if I don't see the fruit of my labor, I want to leave a legacy so that the generations behind me will still feel the same love that we've created. And so that's, the part of the Prosperity Foundation is to make sure that we don't morph into what we already see in the communities, but we are continuously striving to make sure that we are different from other foundations, which is why uniquely creating a unique impact as a part of our mission statement. We want to be unique. We want to be different. We don't want to look like another foundation, because if we do, then we don't need to exist.
Right.
And our community deserves a Black foundation. It deserves the Prosperity Foundation. And we can only keep in control of that if we keep galvanizing and gathering everyone, gathering the collective together for the greater good.
Okay, thank you. That sounds like a call to action for all Black people, but I'm still going to ask you about that call to action at the end.
Okay.
All right. And so, Lord, kind of what's your take on increasing our control of the means of production and wealth?
You're muted,
I
Lord.
think you're on mute.
Okay. So my take on that is how the Penny Foundation came to be about. I first got involved, or first learned about philanthropy, organized philanthropy, through a giving circle, through Birmingham Change Fund. Through, it was Lynetta Gilbert, a program officer at the Ford Foundation, who funded a listening tour throughout the Southeast. And so the whole thing is that these 21 professionals came together and decided to pool resources together, pool our monies together, our time together, our social networks together, to start making grants in the community, right? And so when I think about that experience, and I think about how the Penny Foundation got its name, the Penny Foundation got its name pays homage to the Penny Savings Bank, which is the first Black banking institution in the state of Alabama.
Right.
So it was William Reuben Pettiford was the pastor of 16th Street Baptist Church, and he would take up an offering for the church, and he would take up an offering for the bank. He went to other churches, took an offering for the bank, and then they pooled those monies together, and that's what they started making loans out of. And that's how they go building Black communities in Birmingham in the late 1800s. The model still stands strong today. So yes, I think that we need that as a community that there are opportunities for help and partnership. But I believe that we begin building whatever we have where we're at, no matter what condition, and the other resources will come. I still believe it's always, the power is always in the people. And so I always tell people with the Penny Foundation at the board meetings and what have you, is that we're putting pennies together to power people, right? And so as long as we keep people at the center, then our control becomes greater. Right?
It's important to keep people in philanthropy. I mean, so much of dominant philanthropy is more about money than anything else. And that seems to be putting the cart before the horse, for sure. So we've been talking a lot about, well, first, you all are an example of a glass certainly half full. I always say that in the midst of the most difficult times in Black history, there are always leaders, institutions. We've been talking about the church, which was like our first giving circle, that are visionaries, sort of carriers of hope, and can convert that into change. Before we close today, I'd like you to just identify, even in this difficult times, a key opportunity that you see in your community to create more economic justice. We know the problem. So is there a new opportunity that has emerged in the midst of crisis that you could capitalize on to catapult our community's recovery and rebuilding? And so I can start with Mark.
Sure. So I think the convergence of the pandemic and the social unrest, specifically around George Floyd, created opportunities that you spoke of at the beginning, where there are large institutions, corporations pledging lots of money for various initiatives. I think one opportunity is for us, again, to collectively galvanize, to hold them accountable for what they say. To your point, I know in Pittsburgh and other places, there have been some large pledges made, not necessarily just for our local area. These are multinational organizations. But at the end of the day, who is really out there making sure that they are following through on those pledges, and those pledges really benefiting us? I think the other piece that's important right now, and I think we have a window of opportunity, is it's one thing for foundations across the country to collectively give money to certain initiatives. I know there's been $50 million given to an initiative for 5 years or so. We need to, at this time, talk about asset transfer, right? Not just grant making that goes out the door, but asset transfer where we can actually build assets. I mean, the core definition of an asset is something that has a future benefit, right? And so when we talk about control, we're a 40-year Black foundation that still does not have enough assets under our umbrella to generate enough fees so that we don't have to fundraise outside of our organization, right? When we talk about control, it's about building those assets, whether it's a foundation asset, whether it's individuals building their own assets. Building assets allows you to take control of your future. It allows you to plan. And so I think at this moment, we need to make sure that we're just not asking for funding to focus on certain programs, but we are definitely focused on that asset transfer and asset building so that we become more control of our future destination.
All right. Yes, we need the wealth to do better for sure. Pastor Hughes?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Mark just said. And I would just add to that ownership as well within our community. I grew up during the time where you stayed in your community for talent shows and banquets and the baby showers. Everything was in the basement of your church or in someone's home. We owned everything that we wanted to have. We owned our fun. We owned our joy. We owned it. And for some reason, when we wanted to assimilate, we started to give that all away. In order to get, that asset control that Mark was talking about, we have to bring the ownership back to one another, having the village mentality of raising each of our families together. No one family is leaving the other one behind. Because believe it or not, when I mentioned earlier about the key partnerships, I really failed to mention that our key partnerships were the grassroots people, the people who we just touch every day in the community. Yeah. And everyone who believed in the idea and the mission from the very beginning, they took ownership of that. We needed a foundation in our community. So if there was anything that I would say that the things that I learned the most during this pandemic, it would definitely be how we came together and we were excited last year. And I think now the world is opening back up, some of that wonderful Black talk just is not as exciting right now as it was last year because there's no trauma attached to it this year. And so we have to still own the story and still own where we are in life so that we don't fall back to pre-pandemic. We have to keep moving this pendulum forward.
Okay, well, that's a really interesting observation because crisis does sometimes motivate real change. And so I think we all need to figure out how to keep the momentum going as this new world emerges. And so, Lord, your thought on some unique opportunities that have emerged for you to take Black Birminghamians forward.
Yeah, so I think my answer kind of piggybacks off of where Ursula stopped. Is that some
Oops, I think he froze.
Yeah, I think I don't know about you all, but I can't hear him, and he's not moving.
No, he froze.
Yeah, he dropped out. as
Oh.
the internet, and we, I call it jazz management. We just improvise like our people do and keep it flowing. And when he comes back, I'll just roll him back in. But we
Right.
only have a few minutes left and a couple of seconds. I think the key message that I heard today is that we can do this despite all of the challenges. And I will tell you, last year, first quarter of the year, I was so concerned about the impact of COVID on our people. Suddenly, a third of the COVID deaths in the US were Black.
Mhm.
Our businesses were closing in really unprecedented numbers. I've read statistics that have said half of small to medium sized Black businesses closed as a result of COVID. But I think it's really important for those of us who use philanthropy to remember that philanthropy is a tool of social and economic justice and just not stop at grants. And so I don't see anyone else but me. Okay,
here.
'cause
Still
I
here.
talk, I talk to myself sometimes, but I don't usually do it in public. So, um, so I think the key message I heard from you converges with a shift in Black Philanthropy Month, where we are also focusing on funding equity, finally getting us fair access to private capital, whether that's philanthropy, venture funding, impact investment, and certainly figuring out how to support our businesses and our nonprofits, which are both pillars of a healthy Black community. So I'd like to end by asking you to share your call to action. At this particular moment in time, how can all of us and your constituents and stakeholders help you build the best possible Black future as quickly as possible? So I actually will start back with Mark. I'll go to Pastor Hughes and then Lord.
Thank you. So that's a challenging question to ask. What is our challenge? I think
Or call to action.
or call to action. There are probably 20 things we could rattle off very quickly. I think one, and sorry if this is so broad, but Earl Graves, who was the founder, publisher of Black Enterprise magazine, made a statement once, and he said that it's not that Black people don't give. We give generously. The problem is that we don't give strategically. And so this is a time where we could be extremely strategic about our resources and our giving and our investing in a way that, again, as I said before, we actually can build assets in the Black community. And so for me, it would just be for us to really think about investing, again, whether that's giving or spending our dollars, whatever, strategically. Find out what those key things are in our community that we can support that will help us to develop, to drive success. And just real quick, I think we are in an age of opportunity that we've never been in before. Because of technology, things change so rapidly that the entry in the playing field is almost, I won't say it's equitable yet, but it creates so many opportunities for us to get on the ground floor of new things happening. The goal is we have to be prepared. So if you have an opportunity, you're not prepared to take advantage of the opportunity, then that opportunity is not a good opportunity for you. And so we need to be prepared for all the opportunities, and again, thinking and investing strategically, which will carry us forward.
All right, that reminds me of one of my favorite African proverbs that says, giving is investing. And so I think your reminder that we need to do both and focus on creating assets for now, and the future is right on. Pastor Hughes, your call to action.
Echo what Mark said. It is important to give and give with intentionality. Last year when we were receiving donations, we didn't just accept the check, but we had conversations with those organizations so that it was not just a Band-Aid, that their intentions were pure. They weren't trying to just check a box, but making sure that they really believed in our mission, vision, and purpose. And so if I had any call to action, it would be, visit our website, get in touch with us, so that we can have a real conversation. I don't call a Black conversation a hard conversation. It's a real conversation. And if you are really intentional, then you will, as we say, put your money where your philanthropy is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, put your money where your heartstrings are.
Yes.
So I think it's another key message that you all have been sharing. Is just recognize the economic power of the collective.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you for that. And Lord, your call to action.
My call to action is to find ways to support these organizations. And when I say support, I know for my organization in particular, we are still a young organization and growing. You come talk to me. Don't tell me what all I'm not doing. Come with a sense of, here's how I can help get you where you need to be. Because as the Penny Foundation grows, and that's more resources and funding that goes into the Black community. So I think that when you think about the opportunities that are coming down the pipe, when you think about social justice and people talk about diversity or what have you, well, these should be leading organizations where you're going to look for diversity, and particularly when you're talking about working in the Black community.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I really appreciated your time today. I think your work and your example and your words sort of light a path to how we can mobilize the Black giving economy in our cities, our regions, the nation, and the world to create the future that we want for our people. So really applaud you for everything you're doing. Most of the progress in our country has come from the everyday giving of Black people over centuries. I want to encourage everyone to, if you haven't already, sign the Black Funding Equity Pledge. And this is not just an exercise. We have been doing some strategic planning as Black Philanthropy Month with all of our constituents. And our intention, with the support of the Women Invested to Save Earth Wise Fund, is actually to create a Black Funding Equity Index. I believe one of the problems is that I know I've been in the field for a little over 40 years and we keep talking about equity, but until we can quantify it, baseline it, include the philanthropy and the private capital components of it, we won't have a tool to hold dominant companies and philanthropies accountable. So I'm going to ask our hosts to put the Black equity funding principles in the chat again, and we will be sending everyone a survey to help us build out tools to keep or help philanthropy and the private capital world be accountable to our communities. Thank you for what you do. You are our history, you are our future, and happy Black Philanthropy Month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.